I'm delighted, and of course I'm personally delighted, to introduce our keynote speaker, Michael MacMillan. I had the great privilege of working closely with Michael at Alliance Atlantis for many years, and I really found him to be a very thoughtful, a very inclusive, and innovative visionary. And knowing that Alliance Atlantis were going to be together in 1978, many, many years before that merger actually took place, was an amazing insight and an example of his vision. I thought, and my team thought, that he would be the perfect person to inspire us as we gather our thoughts on what we've learned over the past 2.5 days. Of course, most of you know about Michael's past. He's had more than 30 years of experience in Canada's media sector. When he graduated from Queen's, I'm told he started his empire with $300 in a borrowed minivan. And he sold it for, at least 200 or 300% gain, in 2008. So congratulations to Michael. Michael, we hope, will give us a view of how the landscape has changed over time from his unique perch. And I hope he underscores for us the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for all of us, and particularly independent producers in the global media environment. Michael?
Thanks, Norm, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having me here and inviting me to speak. I really don't know how or why you did that, because I've been retired out of this industry for 5 years. I've forgotten 2/3 of what I knew, and I don't know what's going on these days particularly. But it has been fun in the past couple of days to meet old friends and to swap old war stories and compare what is going on in the industry today to how it used to be. I kind of actually would have imagined that some of the topics in discussion at this gathering would have been more different than they were. They reminded me so much of some of the same old issues and same old debates that we've had for such a long period of time. In any event, it's given me a chance to compare back then, the old days, to the new days. First of all, two things for context. Although when we sold Alliance Atlantis, we by that point were mainly a broadcaster, we began our roots at Atlantis as program makers. And most of my comments in this little speech are going to be wearing my hat, or your hats, as content makers. That's point one to make. And point number two, and I tell you this up front in case I wander off topic and don't get to the punchline, is that I'm an optimist now. I'm generally a happy guy, but from the late 90s until until this year actually, I was bearish, a great pessimist about the impact of technology on our economy, about geopolitics, about our economy, and certainly about the stock market. But now I'm happy to say, after a decade of being a bear, I am a huge optimist. About the economy, maybe not this year, but over the next 5 or 10 years, I'm very optimistic. And specifically, I think that we are about to enter a new golden age for content creation. So to compare and contrast today with the olden days. Well, in the old days, it was certainly a hard business making TV shows. It started every January with a blank slate, not knowing where your revenue was going to come from, what you were going to produce, or how the year was going to go. Inherently, there was no recurring business plan that was likely to happen. And because Canada is not a big enough market, there's no upside really from producing TV shows in Canada or movies, goodness knows, we had to go international, out into that big world, which was hard and confusing. It was an idiosyncratic business with the best laid plans for every TV show ever. Most of them didn't work. That's just the way it is. Financing was complex. It was hard to convince broadcasters or other end users. There was an overabundance of equally talented and equally keen other producers and creators vying for the same limited resources. And we had no direct access to our actual end users. What a great business. And out of all of that, people would say content is king. And it felt good. I love saying content is king. It wasn't true, folks. Content wasn't king. There were two other things, at least, that mattered way more back in the day. If you want to be honest about it, I would say, without which, if you weren't good at these two things, you would not reliably get the chance to be a content creator on any kind of a reliable basis. First of all, the secret to being a successful producer, first and foremost, was you had to be an able financier. You had to be able to play the system. You had to be financially and deal-making very deft. And if you weren't excellent at that, you wouldn't get very far. This wasn't a case of good content makers auditioning for the right to be financed or the right to be financiers. It was actually great financiers auditioning for the right to be content creators. It was true for co-productions, it was true internationally, and for especially sure, it was true in Canada. And secondly, in order to survive and grow, you had to somehow move up the food chain. You had to move up the distribution chain, had to move a few inches or a few feet closer to that center of power, closer to the end users. The worst place to be was only being a content creator. Successful creators clawed, fought, bit, scraped, whatever they weigh, up a few feet up that food chain. They did that for some by being their own international sales agents, for others by being an outright distributor internationally, and being able to write checks to advance money for other programs that they could represent internationally or elsewhere in Canada as a sales agent or distributor. Others were able to negotiate blind output deals with either Canadian or international broadcasters, which got them even further up that food chain. Others, like Atlantis at the time, became broadcasters. I recall very clearly in 1992 reading that the FCC had rescinded the 1971 financial interest rules, which, for those of you who weren't born then, was in great American trust-busting mode, a law that forbade the American three networks from owning any financial interest in programs they telecast in prime time. That law was rescinded in '92 because there was way more channels that came into existence in those 20 years. And if you thought about that for 1 minute, it meant that the business of producing and the business of broadcasting were going to probably come into the same containers, corporate groups. And we realized that as a small producer, distributor based in Canada, we could be roadkill unless we went even further up that food chain, that distribution chain, and tried to become a broadcaster. And that is specifically why we applied for and thankfully were given the license to launch Food Network in 1994. And from that, we moved further into broadcasting. So whatever the method was, key to success for producers was getting that little bit closer to the hand on the throttle, to the key gatekeeper position, because content wasn't king, gatekeeper was king. And a perverse and unintended consequence of this gatekeeper power, and by the way, I speak from having seen this from both sides, or all sides, as a content creator, as a broadcaster. We had 13 channels. I've seen it from every direction, or at least those directions rather. But a perverse and unintended consequence of this great gatekeeper power is what I call the golden key. And that went like this. As we were more successful in creating better subsidy support for the Canadian production and broadcasting industry through the 80s and 90s and this past decade, in order to access that supply side support, producers needed a Canadian broadcaster. And more important than a broadcaster's license fee was just having a commitment, that golden key that unlocked all sorts of goodies. And there's no surprise that the steady decline of license fees from the Canadian broadcasting scene over those 20 years was directly connected to that power. Smart producers understood they had to be great financiers and move up that distribution chain. I may be exaggerating a little bit to make a point, but and I may be oversimplifying, but not by a great deal. So that was back then, and what about now? First of all, it's been a great privilege in middle age to be allowed to spend 5 years not working, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. In my 5 years away from you, I did keep one eye, half watching the media world. And a year ago, I realized that I missed the testosterone of business life, and I missed the camaraderie of the media world. And maybe more importantly, I noticed what I thought was a really neat opportunity. And that opportunity was obviously, there was an enormous amount of horizontal consolidation and vertical integration. The sale of Alliance Atlantis to CanWest and then to Shaw was part of that, of course, but an enormous, unprecedented integration of this industry. And against that, over the past 5 years, the emergence of social media as a very, very important aspect of our lives, and the creation of the tablet. It's now a lot easier to listen, read, and watch what you want and when you want, as we all know. This is fantastic for citizens, and it's fantastic for consumers, and it's wonderful for the talent who actually creates these things, and it's utterly scary, it's terrifying for everybody else in between. So I thought it was an interesting time. If you believe that the pie is growing, if you see that it is easier to read, listen, and watch, what a great time to try and get back in, especially when my colleagues had not much to lose as we were coming into it as new players. And I hope that other people would see a similar opportunity and would agree to join us as we try to build what we now call Blue Ant Media. So anyway, if financing expertise and moving up that food chain were keys in the past, what are the things that today a producer or a content creator or a new broadcaster ought to focus on to try to get ahead? What are the things without which it just won't happen? Well, we all know that there's a huge choice of TV options these days, and an even more humongous choice of online options to watch, read, interact with. Anybody can now make a production. Anybody can now upload it on YouTube or other methods. Anybody can be a broadcaster. Anybody can launch almost any site. So it seems to me that, and it's pretty obvious, that in this environment of overwhelming choice, the key is the need to cut through all that clutter. Launching a website, posting a video, launching an online video channel is easy. Getting anybody to know about it, to use it, is going to be the hard part. And marketing is not exactly the historical strength of Canadian producers or Canadian broadcasters. Far from it, I would say. Producers, because they generally didn't think about it and they didn't have a direct connection to their end user. And broadcasters, I would argue, partly because of their historical reliance on simulcasting. Today's successful content owner, whether they're a producer or a broadcaster, will often perform some, if not all, of the traditional functions of a broadcaster. And the marketing will include branding, like the choices of what the offering is called, search engine optimization, the use of social media, and traditional advertising as well, the use of live events, something we're doing at Cottage Life. Also key to success at marketing will be making choices designed specifically to create convenience for the user, and choices made to make sure that the offering, the product, the channel, the program, whatever it is available in a technology agnostic manner, and able to deal not only with the incumbent platforms and delivery agents, but also the new ones. Successful creators, I would say, successful content companies, whether they're producers or whether they're intermediary packagers like Netflix, or whether they're traditional packagers like Canadian broadcasters, will need to be marketers first and foremost. And while it's possible to offer your content direct from your edit suite to online and get paid for it for its use, either by advertising or some kind of subscription, somebody somewhere has to write a check in the first place to the creator. If you're an individual songwriter, maybe you can wait to get paid. If you're an individual visual artist, maybe you can wait. But for complex content, like what we now call TV shows, that involve a lot of people, it's very difficult not to pay the creators as they are creating it. So somebody has to be able to belly up and write the check and take the risk ahead of time. And that means, in order to have the money to take the risk, that'll be the somebody who has been consistently able to assemble or service or curate not just the content, but the audience. And in order to have done that in the first place, to deliver the audience and to write the check, that somebody has to have been a great marketer. And out of all this, I think it's a neat opportunity for new players to emerge. The second key factor will be access to talent. And that's how we'll get access to content. Winners are going to be those players who are able, whatever you are, whether broadcaster, producer, aggregator, whatever, those who can reliably attract and nurture the best talent. And that doesn't just mean having the biggest wallet. That doesn't just mean buying the best established programs. That would be foolish. Can you imagine the sight of a half dozen players competing to see who has the biggest wallet, to merely outbid each other and Netflix for the privilege of paying even more for the same HBO series or Hollywood studio movies? Ultimately, that's not the way to the winner's circle. Starting earlier in the process, dealing with talent, I think, is. How do you do that? Well, somehow having good taste or being able to spot talent early, or perhaps by being an expert in a certain category or type of programming in order that great talent wants to work with you because you actually have deep expertise in that area. Because barriers to entry have fallen so much, true talent value will rise enormously in the next 5 to 10 years. And imposter or wannabe talent value will fall. So it used to be that if you were a terrific financier and could crawl your way up through that food chain, that distribution chain, make a TV show, things might be good. And now we see that with user-generated content, with fewer barriers to entry, anybody can do it. Now, anybody can write an opera or a novel. All you need is a pad of paper and a pencil and some time. Oh yeah, the hard part, you need talent also. The truth about this access to talent is going to reveal itself in all sorts of different ways. I believe it's why Rogers and Bell are buying MLSE, if you think about it. It's access to talent. And that's not a joke about the Maple Leafs. This access to talent issue will reveal itself in a wide range of quite interesting ways, and the cost of talent, the value of real talent, it becomes the scarcity as opposed to spectrum scarcity or monopoly licenses to operate, which used to be the real scarcity. So, not to put Rogers and Bell in the same sentence as little old Blue Ant, so on a much smaller scale, at Blue Ant Media, we're hoping to navigate through this new world, changing scene. So we are building what we believe will be a digital savvy company, a digital savvy team that wants to be equally at home online as in traditional media. We're building a company that is independent and able to deal with everybody as an unaligned Switzerland when it comes to negotiating with all platforms that will carry or enable our content. So last year, we acquired Glassbox Television, 3 brands, Ox, Byte, and Travel and Escape. They're available both as digital and online products, as well as traditional linear channels. I'm sitting with Raja Khanna, CEO of Glassbox. Also last year we purchased part of Quarto, which publishes 4 magazines, the main one being Cottage Life. And they also run consumer shows. Cottage Life for us is a very interesting niche targeted area, typical of the kind of niche we want to be in. We also in December acquired a minority stake and have sought permission from the CRTC to purchase the balance of High Fidelity Broadcasting, a Toronto company that currently owns 4 small national channels, Oasis, EQ, Hi-Fi, and Radix. And our simple idea is to be excellent in a handful of very narrow niche content categories. Excellence for us will involve, of course, marketing and access to talent. For us, a key part of that marketing focus is in the actual choosing of the narrow niches that we want to operate in. As I said, Cottage Life and Travel and Escape are good examples of that. And to be technology agnostic. Ox started online, Cottage Life started as a magazine, Travel and Escape started on TV. We don't care where they started as long as they end up everywhere. 2 months ago, Torstar Corporation acquired a 25% stake in our company, and they were interesting to us because they also are a content company, and they think as a content company. Our plan is to launch new products via internet-enabled devices of all kind, but also through a conventional linear scheduled channel. Our goal over time, and it's certainly not the case today, but is to have most of the content that we deliver be unique and original to us. That's true in Cottage Life today. It's not true on our linear channels today, but it is a priority in the years ahead. So developing original content in niche categories is what our business is going to be. We'd like to do it with you and grow it with you in the years ahead. God knows we'll need all the help we can get. I'm pleased to be an optimist again after being bearish for a decade, and thank you very much for the chance to speak to you. And I see there's 9.5 minutes left, so I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any. Thank you. Or not. Can't see anything? Thanks very much.